City Council on December 10th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Marlo, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Here.
George Glover.
Here.
Ben Saucetta.
Here.
Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Here.
George Capps.
Here.
Brandy Bailey.
Here.
Jim Schrader.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight, Pastor Con Howerton is going to lead the invocation, and Councilmember Tom Jones is going to lead in the pledge. If everybody please stand.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you. Let's pray. God, we come to you this evening and we thank you for these folks who serve this great city. We pray that, Lord, you'd give them wisdom and grace, and this is a crazy busy time. Family represented there, but Lord, it's a busy time for the thousands of residents of this city. These folks are here to do business that affects them, and I just pray you'd give them help and wisdom and grace, and bless them, Lord, for their work, and Lord, bless this city, God, and just continue to use it for your glory. We love you. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. George?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
And Jim?
And I second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Tonight, we have some promotions. So, Chief?
Mr. Mayor, council members, this evening it's my honor to present to you two individuals who are being promoted in the police department. So I'd ask Lieutenant Hobart Capps to step forward, please. Lieutenant Hobart L. Capps has been employed with the Park City Police Department for a little over 30 years now. He's previously held the ranks of police officer and sergeant, as well as lieutenant. He's the second in command of the police department and supervises patrol investigations. He's also an invaluable member of the department. Many people in our community are familiar with Lieutenant Capps because of his involvement in the community for many years. His professionalism, his dedication to duty, and his humility are apparent to both the public and the members of the police department. And so, Lieutenant Capps, it's my pleasure to recognize your promotion to the rank of captain. Thank you all. The goal here is to have no bloodshed. That's the Congratulations. And have a seat. And all right. Okay. Sergeant Wolf, if you come forward, please. I know everyone knows Sergeant Richard W. Wolf. He's been employed with the Park City Police Department for a little over 14 years. He's previously held the rank of police officer as well as sergeant. Sergeant Wolf currently supervises patrol on the first shift or the day shift, including code enforcement. He deserves a lot of credit for the work he's done with code enforcement and integrating it into the police department. But beyond that, Sergeant Wolf has an ability to relate to people and de-escalate conflict, which I think is tremendously valuable to us. And Sergeant Wolf, it's my pleasure to recognize your promotion to lieutenant. when a bulletproof vest comes in handy sometimes. There you go. Congratulations. Picture here. Congratulations, Rick.
Dana, can we get a picture of all three of them together?
Mayor, can I make a motion, we take a 5-minute break, please?
Is there a second?
I'll say that.
Ben?
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 7-0.
Jill?
All right, and we're back from our recess, and we'll move on. And tonight, under public forum, we don't have anything, and we have staff reports from our city administrator. Sean?
Sir, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a couple updates. 2 dates coming up, both the same day on the 18th of December. First of all, I just wanted to remind Council, December 18th will be the employees' Christmas party. It's going to be held at Best Western this year, and it's going to be from 11 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if Council is able to make that, that would be very nice. And then later that evening, from 6:30 to 8:30 here at Council Chambers, the new owners of 81 Speedway are going to be having their open house, inviting members of the community, as well as racers and promoters, to come out and see their renovation plans and unveiling of their new logo. That's it, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Sean.
Yes, sir.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Brandy?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
And George, you were there for a second.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to new business, which is the first item, which is swearing in of the elected officials. So we're going to take just a minute, and we're actually going to do this live during the meeting and do the swearing in. So Jim?
Okay, raise your right hand, repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
and faithfully, to the best of my abilities,
discharge the duties of council member,
discharge the duties of council member,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Raise your right hand, repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of council member,
discharge the duties of council member,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
and faithfully, to the best of my abilities,
discharge the duties of council member,
discharge the duties of council member,
so help me God.
so help me God.
All right, raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
and faithfully, to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties of council member,
discharge the duties of council member,
so help me God.
so help me God. Thank you.
It's always exciting when we get to recognize individuals in the community, not only staff, but also people that have chosen to serve and take time out of their busy lives and schedules to serve the community. So it's an exciting evening for us. That will bring us to item 8, which is discuss and consider appointments to the Convention and Tourism Board. These are just reappointments of people that are currently serving for us that wish to continue. And I would recommend that we allow those individuals to keep serving on those boards. Ben?
I make a motion to approve the appointment of Kimberly Madison, Jennifer Wells, and Al Bula to the Convention and Tourism Board with a term ending January 2022.
And Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 9, which is discuss and consider appointment to the Community Relations Board. If everybody remembers, at the last meeting, we had to take Cindy off just because we didn't have that application yet, and she got that back into us. So we'd like to make sure that we go ahead and get her added to that Community Relation Board as well. Ben?
Make a motion to approve the appointment of Cindy Bressler to the Community Relations Board with a term ending June 30th of 2021.
And Brandy?
Second the motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. How much time do you think we need for the recesses for the land bank? D? Okay, all right. I would ask for a 2. I'd ask for a 4-minute recess. How about we split the difference there from the council? Ben?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we recess for 4 minutes.
And George?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. We're going to reconvene as the council, and we'll move on to item 12, which is discuss and consider the acceptance of the land bank funds and abatement of special assessments and lots sold by the land bank. Dee?
The sale price for the land bank property was designed to cover the average amount of the special assessments on the original 174 lots the land bank received. The proposed motion is to accept the amount of the proceeds that covers the outstanding delinquent and future specials on the 24 lots sold, and also to abate the amount of the specials so they no longer appear as outstanding on Sedgwick County records. I would also like you to be aware that because the amount of specials on these specific 24 lots is lower than that average that we're selling the property for, there will still be $53,000 of the proceeds that we cannot transfer out, so they'll stay in the land bank. That, combined with approximately $20,000 left over from the 2018 sale, the balance in the land bank will be just under $73,000.
Thank you, Dee. Does anybody have any questions for Dee? Or recommendation? Ben?
I move to approve to accept $89,783.26 from the Park City Land Bank, to direct the city clerk to deposit proceeds to the bond and interest fund and to abate special assessments on the sold properties lots 1 through 11, Block J, and lots 1 through 13, Block I of the High Ridge Second Edition.
And George?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you again, Dee. That brings us to item 13, which is discuss and consider the purchase of new handguns, trade-in of used handguns, and purchase of electronic sights and accessories for the handguns. Chief?
Mr. Mayor, council members, this proposal this evening has a couple of parts to it, so it's a little bit convoluted, so I'll be glad to answer any questions when we get to that point. The current Glock handguns that are owned by the police department are approximately 5 years old. The firearms distributor that we've dealt with has a trade-in program. They prefer to trade in these guns at 5 years or less. They're not much interested in them beyond 5 years. It's a very good deal for us. Allows us to trade in the guns and get new ones for roughly $56 a piece, as opposed to $429 a piece for a new gun. Trading in the guns now allows us to maximize the value on trade-in, also to minimize the maintenance and problems that result over time, and also allow the officers to have the newest generation of handgun, because there are always new features that come out. The cost to trade in our existing handguns and purchase new ones is a total of $1,245. The second part of this has to do with the proposal to purchase electronic sights for our handguns. The guns basically need to be made in such a way that they can accept the electronic sight. So by purchasing the new handguns, it presents us with the opportunity to go with the electronic sights if we buy the guns that are prepared to accept those sights. So that gives us the opportunity to do it at this time. The technical term is ruggedized miniature reflex sight, or I just say electronic sight or red dot sight. This type of handgun sight, it presents our officers with a number of benefits for their safety, particularly quicker reaction time, the ability to focus on the threat and not to focus on the sights on the gun. So normally you're focusing on two sights that are very close to you, as well as the threat off in the distance, and that's very difficult to do. It allows you to focus on the threat with just the red dot. It's not a laser sight, just to clarify. It doesn't project a dot onto the target. It just has a red dot inside the sight. These benefits will provide extra safety for our officers. I think it's the wave of the future. We're seeing this move to this type of sight across the country. The issue usually is the money, because it's expensive. The holsters that the officers have now do not accept this gun with this sight on it, so we would need to purchase new holsters. That would also allow us to upgrade to the newest generation of holster and to standardize across with all our officers having the same holster, because now they don't all have the same. The funding for this would come from three sources, essentially. One being the unused funds in the 2019 police budget. That's $11,387.01, and of that, it's about a little over $10,000 that is in the firearms budget that has not been spent. In addition to that, about $3,591 in federal forfeiture funds, or the acronym is FISA, and then the $1,345, excuse me, comes from the Equipment Reserve Fund. The reason for that is that the council, I understand, cannot vote in this year to spend money next year. So by using the Equipment Reserve Fund to purchase the guns in this year, we could make the purchase all at once and then replenish the fund after January 1st, rather than having to wait after the first of the year. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for the chief? George?
Well, I'd like to make a statement. Yeah, you know, the last council meeting, I talked about 36 officers killed in the line of duty. Here we are 2 weeks later, and now it's 41. And it's no question, this sighting deals, if nothing else, sells that for me, because it's great. I'm still a firearms instructor, so I understand the significance of that, and it's great for the officers. You couldn't do anything better to help them, and I wholeheartedly support this. So I would make a motion to approve the quote from GT Distributors in the amount of $1,345 to be paid out of the Equipment Reserve Fund, and the quotes for Keesler Police Supply Incorporated in amount of $14,978.84 to be paid out of the Police Federal Forfeiture Fund, $3,591.83, and the 2019 Police Department budget, $11,387.01.
Okay, Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Mayor.
That brings us to item 14, which is discuss and consider an ordinance amending section 18-206 pertaining to fireworks. So Doug, just before you start, I just want everybody to know that Doug worked on this from some recommendation from other people, so we need to make sure that we know that Doug is not in the hot seat for what he's been asked to do. And Doug's just going to simply explain the ordinance and what's being proposed and the changes. Doug?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, the ordinance that you have in front of you this evening is really a starting point for discussions based upon some concerns that have been expressed in prior meetings, and also based upon a meeting that Sean and the mayor and Councilman Jones and Councilman Capps and I had to discuss primarily what's happening in other cities, how they regulate their sales and how they regulate their use, focused kind of primarily on time frames. When do they start selling? When do they stop selling? When do they start allowing discharge of fireworks, and when do they terminate the discharge of fireworks? So what you have in front of you makes two changes that are of some significance. Some time back, the city of Park City made provision to extend the 4th of July discharge when the 4th fell on a Friday or Saturday, and the extension was then through the weekend. So if you had a July 4th on a Friday, you could fire fireworks on the July 4th, July 5th, and July 6th. That's pretty unusual. It didn't exist anywhere else in Sedgwick County or any of our other sister cities, surrounding cities. And so this ordinance in front of you does away with that. And then the second change that's in this ordinance is to increase the permit fee for fireworks stands for the large ones, and that's essentially the only thing we ever get. I don't know that we've ever had the smaller square foot stand that's down at $1,000 permit, but to increase that fee from $5,000 to $6,000. And then there was discussion about limiting the number of stands administratively to 5. And then finally, a comment about Councilman Capps' concerns about some specific fireworks and their potential to cause damage to property and personal injury. I think Sean maybe have a comment about that. He had some discussion with fireworks distributors. And then I think that the control of those sorts of fireworks that might pose that sort of a risk is something that we could handle administratively in our permitting process. In other words, we would just make it known when we grant a permit that these specific fireworks are not allowed in our city. So I'd be glad to answer any questions, and maybe refer to Sean if you had questions about the fireworks discharging and the survey that we did of other cities.
Okay, before we go anywhere else, we're just gonna let Sean, I'm gonna let you catch the baton.
Okay.
And just kind of carry that conversation forward with some of what we had, and then I'll probably come to George.
Okay. Originally, when we were tasked to take a look into this, we went around to about 8 or 9 different of our sister cities around the area and asked them what their ordinances contained. The vast majority of them, I think all but one, start their fireworks distribution and sales on June 26th. Most of them carry it all the way through July 5th. Park City is the anomaly to where we, like Doug mentioned, if it's on a Friday, we allow it to continue throughout the weekend. One city was very restrictive, and basically you get about 3 or 4 hours to shoot fireworks on the night of the 4th of July, and that's about it. The other thing that we wanted to do is make certain that we reached out to the actual fireworks vendors. So we reached out to those that have had stands here in our city before. And the first one I reached out to was the right person, I think, to talk to, because they have more than 500 stands around the states. And we're addressing some concerns that Councilmember Capps had brought up about a projectile that has a plastic tip on it and blades that when it comes down, it's still probably greater than somewhere around 4 or 5 ounces, and could possibly hurt somebody or cause injury. The gentleman was very pleased to announce that out of his 500 stands statewide, he probably sells less than 30 cartons of those throughout the whole entire state. So that would be something administratively that Doug had mentioned that we could just go ahead and regulate, saying, sorry, these are not allowed, these 2 types. And it wouldn't have an impact, and he was very supportive of that. I did learn that the fireworks industry is very well regulated as far as, and there have been vast improvements over the last 5 to 10 years as far as the size of the projectile and what kind of debris is left over, the biodegradable factors within the paper and everything along that line. So that made me feel good, but that's what we basically come up with. And as a tasking, I went and talked with various other city managers around the area to see if there was maybe a consensus throughout Sedgwick County as to limit the total number of days. Most of them, quite honestly, said, no, we're happy with where it's at right now. So they didn't want to bother with that, and so that's why after having a couple discussions, we came up with some proposals. And most importantly, as Doug had mentioned, this is a place just to start the conversation to figure out which way council would like to go on this.
Thank you, Sean. George, do you want to piggyback off of anything that's been said so far?
Well, first off, I want to thank Sean for all the hard work, and he put some effort in this, and apparently made some good contacts, so that's appreciated. And one other thing I'd say, with all the wind and stuff, I thought about bringing it up here for another show and tell, but the wind blew this thing off my roof, and it looks like the base of a small rocket. It's got 4 fins on it, and it's fused in the top. And that thing apparently has been on my roof since the 4th of July, but it blew off, so I had that. So apparently I'm right in the middle of the hot zone where I live, and it seems like everything comes down in my yard. But I support this.
Okay. Well, I know you had kind of brought this up, so I just want to make sure that this kind of meets what you were looking at.
It does. The main thing is I'd like people to understand that when they shoot these things off, they're affecting other people's lives and their property. And, basically a good public awareness. I learned years ago as a police officer, sometimes if you got a problem, if you just sit people down and talk to them and tell them what the problem is, it solves it. And I certainly wanted the discussion going about it because, like I say, I'm really on the receiving end of this stuff where I live.
All right, thank you, George. Ben?
Yeah, I do have just a couple questions. I want to say thank you all for the work put in on this. One, I guess, a couple questions maybe that can just be answered. Is there a reason why we're wanting to limit it to only 5 vendors? Or was that just a suggestion, or do we know why?
As we were going through some of the discussions, I'm not going to say that there was concerns, but just a point that was brought up that are we almost tied to the number of stands, because it is good revenue, no doubt about it. It has been. This last year, the city had 7 stands. And so it was thought about, well, if you do that, you almost could make it a more selective class to where we're protecting somebody's market share and building a better relationship with these vendors going forward, almost as a preferred vendor to sit there and say, you've done business with Park City before in the past. So that way it's just not stands after stands after stands, because right now there currently is no limit on them. That's a point for council to discuss. One of the discussions I had with a city manager from Derby over this past weekend was about it. Derby's up to 11 stands, and it is good money. The one thing that I would, if I could, Mayor, that I forgot to mention the first time, one of the points that they had brought up is a difference between the actual distribution, selling of them, and the discharge of fireworks. Most of the other cities, the reason why they go to the 5th is so that way those fireworks stands can kind of do their half-price sale the next day and clear out their inventory. So that was one of the things that they said, hey, council may want to take into consideration. So, but that's why, no specific reason, just looking at it from that perspective.
Along that same line, can you touch just a little bit on pricing, on kind of what we've found out?
It ranges from, I think the low end was like $2,500 per stand, and limiting it to 4 stands just to the east of here. The most expensive community appears to be Andover at $7,500 a stand. Derby is $7,000. Most of them range between the 4 to 5 to 6,000 range. So,
I mean, I would favor not limiting the number of stands necessarily. I mean, I understand the purpose of preferred vendors or building relations, but I also appreciate free markets.
Yes, sir.
In the sense that if someone wants to take the time, whether it's churches or youth groups or school groups or whatever it is trying to earn money, I'd hate to be the one saying, well, you know, we have this vendor who's been here for 15 years and tough, you're out of luck, you don't get a stand. So I would prefer taking that portion out.
Councilman and Mayor and Council, that's not in the ordinance.
Okay.
That was going to be handled kind of in a similar way to the regulation of those fireworks that we didn't want discharged in the city. That was a suggestion, so it's not in the ordinance. If the ordinance were adopted, you would not be restricted. That's really more of an administrative matter, and the council can decide that that's not something they want to do and could impose a different limit or no limit whatsoever.
Okay.
And part of that too, in that discussion was, if we have a vendor that violates any of our policies with the fireworks that we've identified, let's say the 4 ounces or more that comes back to the ground, that we would then not allow them to come back the next year if they can't follow the rules.
And that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Right on that part. I would also favor leaving it through the 5th for the same reason that was mentioned by some of the other cities.
For sales
For sales and
discharge?
Yeah. I understand some might not agree on the discharge portion, but I would, again, favor both of those there just simply for the fact of consistency, but allowing these to, for lack of a better word, offload what they have still left over, for keeping consistent with what others in the area are doing. My only other questions, and then I'll be done here at this point. I mean, we have a lot of specifics on here as far as one's own property, age 14, adult resident may serve, and I'm just kind of bouncing through 1, 2, 3 here. An adult resident may not serve as a supervising adult for a guest on number 3 under the age of 14, unless such guest is also supervised by his or her parent or guardian. How do we plan to enforce that? I mean, how is that enforceable as far as ordinances go? I'm not opposed to it. I mean, we can put stuff in on stone or in paper and make it the law, but how do we actually enforce that?
I'm not going to answer that. I'll leave that to the chief or Sean to comment on, but that's no different than what's been in this ordinance for 15 or 20 years. That I did not change that.
Oh, okay. I was just looking at the red highlighted areas.
Well, I moved it.
Okay.
I moved it to a more appropriate place. The ordinance really didn't function very well the way it had been for several years, but the substantive restrictions on the discharge, although they're in red, they were only in red because they were moved to that section. They've not changed one bit.
Okay. And I didn't have a copy of the original one, so that's why I apologize there on that part. I mean, that'd just be my question. I mean, how does that really get monitored or taken care of? I don't see how that does.
Chief, can you comment?
Here you go.
As far as the enforcement, again, what Doug said is no change in the ordinance. It's the same as it's been for 15 years or whatever. But in general, when we show up at the scene where there's a street full of kids and they're supposed to be supervised at least by a parent if there's another adult there. If that wasn't in place, you find situations where there's one adult There might be 30 kids out there, and they may not really have anything to do with each other. That person may step up and say, oh, I'm the adult here that's watching over these kids, and there's really no way for us to show otherwise if we show that we can look into guardianship. Honestly, a lot of these things don't get into the courtroom very rarely. It usually comes down to we deal with them on the street, and we talk to the parents and the people that are involved at the scene and the adults, and we usually get compliance that way. The only way that we don't is when somebody just flat refuses to cooperate, in most cases, or if they injure someone or be doing something really dangerous.
Okay, thank you. And I guess, is there, we say not on city streets, but I'm almost positive that's where almost a lot of them do it, because it's the only flat surface most of them have. What do we do in those instances when, I mean, because most driveways are pitched to some degree, and that makes firing fireworks much more dangerous, obviously, if you're shooting them off at an angle. How does that work as far as when you're dealing with street versus?
Again, if they're shooting them in the street, we have situations where folks will take over an entire street and they're shooting them off. And so that obviously causes a problem. People are trying to simply drive back and forth to their homes, and they run into this barrage of fireworks. I understand what you're saying about the angle and so forth. That's the issue, though, that we run into is some people, and we have several neighborhoods who every year ask for and get a permit to shut off part of their street in order to have a party, and they shoot off fireworks in that area. So that's one solution, but can't do it with the whole city, obviously.
Thank you very much. That's good information to know.
Okay, Tom?
I got a correction. Doug gave me credit for being on that team. I believe it was Melvin that was on there.
Actually, it wasn't. You were just in there that
I was
one
in the
day.
room when we were talking about it? Okay, then I stand corrected. I got credit for something I didn't know I was contributing to. I got a couple things on here. I would be opposed to moving that to the 5th, be able to buy and sell. Like I said, this year they were shooting them off. They were shooting aerials off on the 7th, down not very far from me. And I think that not only the projectiles, but there's some significantly large mortars going off now that I'm not sure are legal in this area. We just need to look into that, try to limit it. If there's no sales, they shouldn't be able to fire them. So some people down in my neighborhood spend a lot of money on this stuff, and it's big and it goes for hours. And so we need to pull back on it a little bit. But I'm opposed to extending it. I was brought that up at the council meeting that I know on our current one, if it fell on the weekend, they got to extend it. And they're already getting to go for a week. Mm-hmm. So I'd just soon cut them off on the 4th.
I will say, like, when we look at the date ranges, I was actually surprised everybody was so consistent in start and finish date, except for us having that extension. And I will say, when I get complaints personally, and I know most of the time it's from veterans, people with pets, dogs, they don't want to see it end, but they don't understand why we allow so many days. And I really think, looking at cutting back on the end, we looked on the front side does not make sense. That's when everybody puts up tents and starts selling. But I do feel like on the end, it gives everybody in the community still gets to do what they want to do, but then we cut back a little bit for the people that this is detrimental for them being a community. And when we look at the tents, kind of cutting it back really came back to more, how can we enforce? I still think you probably have a limit on it. Do we want to have 11 or 12 or 15 tents in town? Probably not. Is 5 the right number? Maybe not. Maybe it's 7, maybe it's 8. But I just think it's something that the council needs to consider. The more tents that you have, there's an aspect of enforcement that we could be in with having our code enforcement officers or such going through, looking to see if they're selling anything they shouldn't be. And if we just let, 15 tents come to town, it puts more of a burden on us. So I just think that's something to look at. Is 5 the right number? Probably not. But it is something that we should look at. There should be a limit for the size of the community and how many we have. John?
So, I'm opposed to the 5th. But I'm trying to think on the number of tents, I really think, I think the way we price the licenses is gonna determine that. If we're too high, we may have 2. Because they're only willing to pay X amount of money if they can make X amount of money. So I think we can set that by our fee that we're charging. Because if someone pays us an ungodly price for the license and they come here and don't make any money, they're not gonna be back next year. So I think if we had 5, maybe or we had 7 last year, to me, that sounds like, maybe our price is where it needs to be, or maybe we increase it a little bit. Maybe we'll see what happens to the market and we can adjust it for the following year. I'm opposed to the 5th, I said that. I think that's really it, but I was cleaning some gutters out on my house this weekend. I'm not sure what George did with the little base of the thing, but I think I found it in my gutters, because I had one too. But, yeah, I think this is a good idea to look at this every year. It seems like when the 4th comes on, there's a lot of people grumping about what we're allowing, but I don't want to have knee-jerk reactions either, so I think this is a good time to look at it.
Okay. Brandon?
I like John's idea of looking at this every year. For the number of stands, I don't know if 5 is the right answer. Since we had 7, I would go with, maybe we keep it at 7. I like the $6,000, increase it $1,000, and then let's see how it plays out. Under the new item M, section 4, so that was always in the old ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. And then, when it comes to the 27th, you said most cities do the 26th?
Yes, that's correct. 26 is when they start.
Okay. I think I'm okay with the 27th, but I don't think I'd be in favor of letting them shoot off on the 5th. I could maybe go with seeing them sell on the 5th, but not allowing them to be shot off.
George?
Yeah, I'm with George. I spent a lot of time picking up firecrackers, fireworks in my backyard right after 5th, 6th, 7th when they're shooting them off. I'm opposed to the 5th. I think we give the residents plenty of time to shoot off their fireworks during the designated times that we offer. Raising it from 5,000 to 6,000, I think is appropriate, considering what some of our neighboring cities charge. I think 6,000 is appropriate. Again, what the mayor says is the enforcement. If we have more stands, that stems from having more code enforcement or whoever, police officers, to enforce those tents as well. So I would be opposed to the 5th. I think 4th is fine with me. And also the number of stands, I think that's something we can look at, but I'm okay with 5 at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Ben?
Sure, I would, 5th is my preference. I'm not hard set. This isn't a hill to die on, obviously, over something like that. So if the majority of the council feels the 4th is that's perfectly fine. I will say, though, to one of the points made, having an ordinance obviously hasn't kept people from lighting fireworks after the time that they're already allowed. So people are going to do some of the stuff, whether we have a law on the book or not. That's just what they do. So having some sort of ordinance that limits the date to the 4th or the 5th, if you're having people doing it on the 7th, obviously the one still, that didn't stop anybody from firing them, or large mortars. I don't know if you're going to chase down that mortar and see what size it is to regulate it. I think some of it just goes back to what George said earlier about just public awareness and public service comments. It's a good time, leading up to July when fireworks go on. Maybe May and June start to have the conversation in council meetings or just in public, saying, hey, remember we have veterans, we have people with animals and such that are in our community, and we need to be respectful of everybody that lives there. I mean, doing some of that public service is going to be more effective than putting additional laws or rules on the books, because people are much more fine to be considerate of individuals when there's a human aspect to it, not a piece of paper to it. So I don't think limiting the amount of stands is necessary. I think, as Councilman Lanier said, their pricing is going to determine a lot of that. If we raise the fees to $6,000, we might see that drop 1 or 2. But again, I don't see the purpose in trying to put a limit on allowing individuals to try to make money, and in some cases have livelihoods, or in some cases raise money for camps and things like that. So I'm firmly opposed to putting a cap on the number of stands. I think the pricing will situate that.
Okay. Nobody else has anything they want to say?
Well, I would tell John, I didn't plant that.
I don't know, I think a good move here is, just from what the council said, I think it makes sense to roll back to the 4th. I think it makes sense that we do the $1,000 increase, and that we do not limit the number of tents. And I think that's a good starting point to see what the impact is for this next year. I know Sean's reached out, and I don't think we're gonna see anything from vendors that this is going to discourage them in any way. And I do think probably what John said would be right is, you know, if we get up to 10 tents, we need to jack the price to $8,500 and see what we get, to try to handle the amount of tents within town. So, Tom?
Well, I was going to make a motion on this ordinance, but I'm sitting here trying to skim and make sure the only thing we got in here is the value that we're going to charge and the cutoff date, correct? That's actually in the ordinance. The other stuff is outside what's in the ordinance?
Yes, sir.
That's correct. There was a kind of in subsection H, I put in no smoking or alcoholic beverages,
Right,
because that was more appropriate there, but it was already in there. And then again, as I told Councilman Sauceda, the entirety of subsection M was in another section. I just moved it there because it read better and flowed better. But those restrictions are exactly the same as they've always been.
I was trying to go from memory, so I was skimming it again to make sure. The only thing we're addressing in this ordinance is the day that it stops, the 4th, and the $1,000 increase for the tent.
That's correct.
And the other stuff was other stuff, so.
Administrative,
Right.
correct.
I would make a motion or move to approve ordinance 1085-2019, an ordinance amending section 18206 of the municipal code of City of Park City, Kansas, pertaining to the sale and discharge of fireworks, the issuance and permits for the sale thereof, and repealing the original of said section.
Brandy?
I'll second the motion.
Ben?
So just for clarification, the way that I understand that, we're accepting it as presented then, basically. We didn't make any changes. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marlo, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Ben Sauceda.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that ordinance passes 7-0. Thank you. That was good, healthy discussion. So I appreciate that from everybody. Tom?
Outside this ordinance, could maybe May timeframe, we could have one of the typical vendors or somebody that's a wholesaler come in and talk about what's available in Sedgwick County for sale that would be offered in the city, so
Okay.
that we could approve or disapprove at that time what we would allow them to sell? Or am I stepping out of bounds on this?
No, it might be best to have a committee look at that, but I think the main thing that we've looked at or discussed is looking at some type of weight limit, like
Yes, sir.
Anything that's 4 ounces or above that has some type of leftover material.
Right.
Those would not be allowed within
And
the
I
city.
understand that there may be some loads we don't want allowed too.
Yes, sir.
Amounts of a powder or something like that.
And like I said, out of the two that I talked with, the first guy, both very agreeable. They want to be good neighbors. They want to do good business here in the city. So I'm certain that they would welcome the opportunity to discuss this further and make certain that they're doing everything we expect and that we're getting along well.
Well, I'm just throwing some seeds out on the ground, and maybe we could approach that before the 4th, a couple months before the 4th, and try to understand what we've got ourselves into with the tent, what we can expect
Yes, sir.
for sale locally.
I think.
And it's something we haven't done in the past.
That's not a bad idea. And the other thing I just want to point out that we learned through this is there are good regulations that they are regulated within, and we could probably just get that guideline that they have of what they have to abide by as being our starting point, and then maybe going from there.
I agree.
Ben?
Sure, I would just, again, go back and just maybe suggest that we look at doing some public service awareness and leading up to the 4th, maybe
I've got
May,
that
June.
down, leading, starting at the early June portion.
Whenever, just
Yes, sir.
something there, remind people, be a good neighbor.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 15, which is discuss and consider a special workshop on 61st Street and Broadway traffic study. Sean?
Yes, sir. Back in September, council approved amending WSP's design and engineering contract related to our current KDOT project for 61st Street, west of the bridge that's being currently reworked at this time. The amended scope of work included an intersection control evaluation, which is designed to evaluate alternative configurations and traffic control alternatives based on the review of existing conditions, traffic operations, safety, and total cost. The study has just been turned in this past week and outlines 4 alternative configurations for the 61st Street North and Broadway intersections, all 4 for council's consideration. Staff is recommending that we hold a special workshop on January 7th at 6:00 p.m. so that way we can dedicate the entire evening to discussing the alternatives. I'd make certain that we from WSP have the project engineer of record so far, as well as a traffic safety engineer, so that if there's questions. If council elects to do that later on this evening, I'll go ahead and send you an advance copy of the traffic intersection control evaluation. It's 107 pages, and that's why I didn't include it in your packet tonight. So.
Okay. So now, usually this is something we kind of do in the off Tuesday night, and usually we try to meet an hour earlier. So this was the date that we looked at. And I do think this would be a great thing for a workshop because of the content and the amount of content that's there for discussion on this. And hopefully everybody's looked at their calendar and decided whether or not this day can work. Ben?
Sure, I'd go ahead and make a recommendation, or a motion here that we schedule a special workshop on January 7th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
Okay. And George?
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 16, which is an executive session for discussion pertaining to non-elected personnel. Doug, you know, if you want to cover this, just
The motion is...
I need 25 minutes.
25 minutes?
Yes.
The motion is real accurate, so suggested motion should be to recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss non-elected personnel with the city council, the administrator, the city attorney, and the assistant administrator.
Okay. Ben?
Should I go ahead and make a motion that we move to recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss non-elected personnel with council, mayor, city attorney, city administrator, and assistant city administrator.
Okay. Jim?
I second that.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. And Brandy, at the time, it's 8:02. Thank you. All right. We're back from our executive session where no binding action was taken. That was the last item on our agenda, so we'll go ahead and move on to governing body reports, and we'll start with Jim.
I have no remarks tonight.
Randy?
Tonight.
George?
Is this our last meeting of the year?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
And I would wish everyone a Merry Christmas. Just a thought, without taking preface it by not taking a side one way or another, reminds me of what's going on in our world today of a fellow Oklahoman named Will Rogers. He once said, he said, "I'm not a comedian. I just watch the government and report the facts." And I think that really fits with our world today.
Thanks, George. Tom?
I wish everybody Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, since we're not going to be here between now and then. This week, I had a gentleman reach out to me that I hadn't talked to for a while. Former council member Chris Johns, now lives over in Andover, tell everybody hi. So he's doing well.
Yeah.
Ben?
Sure, I just want to take a second here, wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Get out and check the lights in the community. It's been neat to go driving along throughout our city. There's so many houses that have put up decorations there, and I saw today that this Park City Pride and the Park City Chamber of Commerce is having a lighting contest there that you can find out more information on the city Facebook page or through them. And so you can call the Pride number that's listed, give them your address, and they'll be doing that, I believe, until the 15th, if I remember right, and then the 18th is when they're judging. So, but get out and enjoy the beautiful sights around our city with the lights there. And then also want to take a second here, and Councilman Capps alluded to this earlier, and we spent some time promoting a couple of our officers here this evening. But one of the tragic things that we've seen over the last 5 days is four officers whose lives have been taken senselessly, and not just that, but even cowardly in many ways. And I can't say enough thank you to our officers here in our town that give of their time and put their lives on the line for our safety, to their spouses, to their children, to their parents, and all those that really do serve alongside. I am thankful for that, and pray for their safety as they're out protecting us, and not just in our city, although we have the best police force by far, but also to our neighboring towns and our neighboring communities and our Sedgwick County officers. Our thoughts and prayers are with you as well, because I know that it has to weigh heavy on you, knowing the burden and knowing the attacks that are out there. So to our police department, thank you.
George?
Yeah, I also want to tell everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as we get ready to celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior. Also want to thank the employees of Park City and the work that you've done this past year in providing services for the citizens of Park City. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
John, do you have any comments?
I have nothing. I would make a motion, we adjourn.
And Ben?
Second.
Okay, just one last thing I want to add. I want to thank staff for all the decorations throughout City Hall. It's been pretty cheery to see this, so I'm sure Dana was a huge part of that, and Debbie, so I appreciate it. It's fantastic to come in, and I've heard some compliments from people in the community that have come in just to pay their water bill or do business within the city by the appearance of what we have. Thank you all. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Do we need to sign?